Welcome to Be More with Tom Bassett. In this series, I will aim to inspire you to be more of every role within the Salesforce ecosystem. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, Vanessa. Thank you so
Hello.
much for joining me today for session one of my Be More series. And today we are here to talk about why anybody should consider being more business analyst. So,
Well, why don't we start out with, since this is the first episode, tell me about why you're doing this.
yeah, sure. So, my name is Tom, and ultimately, kind of here to run a series of episodes and interviews with real people in the ecosystem across different roles, and ultimately inspire people to embrace more of that role or to perhaps forge their own path and develop their own career in that role as well.
Hey, I'm excited. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us. I feel in good hands here, and yeah, let's get started, shall we? So the kind of first question for you really is to give us a brief overview of who you are and your role as a BA or business analyst.
So, my name is Vanessa Grant. I live in the Los Angeles area. I have been in the Salesforce ecosystem for 13-ish years at this point, in various roles as a product owner, a business analyst, a manager. I've been consulting the last few years, so I end up playing a lot of different roles on different projects. But business analysis has really been my bread and butter ever since I discovered it a few years ago, and actually was able to kind of put vocabulary words to the work that I love doing on a day-to-day basis. It's really been my focus in my career. So I do that. I also do some clicked coaching on the side for folks that are new to the Salesforce ecosystem, and I also co-host the Salesforce Career Show that gets uh, taped is not the word. Recorded on Twitter Spaces every couple weeks on Wednesdays at 2:30 Pacific.
Okay, perfect. So a professional content creator then I see.
Oh God,
No?
cringe, cringe.
That that's great, and I guess kind of says it all really in terms of your work with Clicked as well to kind of help people get into the ecosystem. Is that something that you enjoy in particular? Do you get that out of your everyday role?
So, before I really dedicated my career to Salesforce, I was a Salesforce, I guess, product owner, but I was a business operations. I was a VP of business ops at a company. And so I managed a team of 7. And one of my favorite parts of being a manager is really like nudging people towards their career goals. I mean, I feel like one of the hallmarks of a successful manager is when your people can leave and move closer towards their career goals. But when I left that role, or was kicked off that role because layoffs, and I'd been there for 17 years. Whole story. We don't need to get
Yeah.
into that. But when I ended up switching careers, I had 2 tiny little children at home, and the idea of dealing with all the other stuff that comes with managing people, like the HR stuff and the administrative things, was a little bit difficult. So I ended up moving more towards consulting, so I could really just focus on overseeing projects. But I did really miss that aspect of supporting people in their career journeys. And so to kind of make up for that like little hole in my heart that I
Yeah.
that I didn't get from managing people anymore, I really got involved in the Salesforce community, particularly in business analysis, but also particularly in just helping guide people transitioning their careers into Salesforce careers, new folks to the ecosystem, and there's a lot of information out there, and so helping people find their paths, and maybe helping accelerate their careers has always been kind of a just a thing that I do for me because I like helping people.
Okay. No, that's great. So I guess you could summarize it by your day to day focusing on processes and business ways of working, and then the other bit focusing on people and supporting people and coaching people through their career paths. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's that's fair. My day job tends to be more project based these days, but my after work community work is really focused on supporting others, which is, where I feel good.
Awesome.
Helping corporations is great though, okay? Please keep
Yeah.
paying me for this, whoever's listening.
Yeah, perfect. And is that mostly aspiring admins? Is that aspiring BAs? What type of people go through those courses and use support?
So, in Clicked specifically, I do coaching. I tend to do coaching for the admin and analyst sprints, they call them. So it's the idea that you can kind of play that role in a safe space, so that if you screw something up, or if you have some questions, like there's no stupid questions, just anybody can go through it and have a, like, almost like a fake and like real engagement. We do our best to kind of make it as realistic as possible. So right now I'm in the middle of one uh where they're doing Service Cloud, and so we have a case issue, and so we're starting off, and it's 5 weeks. So they're writing user stories, they're grooming the user stories, they're building, they're going to be demoing for us. They've interviewed us, so I played a stakeholder in the beginning. They interviewed another stakeholder. So we're doing our best to make it as realistic as possible, and we're really lucky that Salesforce has really subsidized the program, because they really do want to help kind of close that skill gap in the industry.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you kind of lent on user stories a little bit there. Do you have a soft spot for those? Do you love a good user story?
I love a good user story, but it's so difficult to do them. Like there's like some weird nuance of like being
Mm,
able to do a user story right. And the people kind of tend to like love them or hate them. But if you do user stories badly, like you can tank multi-million dollar projects. I have seen multi-million dollar projects like teeter on bad user stories. And so I'm very passionate about doing them properly. I've started doing speaking sessions on that. I like doing click sessions on that. We even have like one-off skills challenges just go on user stories, where
yeah,
people are able to practice them, because there really is like a bit of formality to user stories, but also a bit of creativity with user stories to really kind of get them right for the project that you're on.
yeah, perfect. And as well as user stories, what kind of other responsibilities do you have in your day-to-day role?
As a business analyst, when I'm playing that role, there's obviously a lot of documentation in the form of user stories or writing things out as far as processes go. There's business process mapping. So as people are kind of telling you how their business process works, getting that mapped out into a visual so we can all kind of get on the same page, and especially if you have multiple stakeholders that are maybe not in entirely agreement on how the process should work. Sometimes having a visual will help. There's a lot of communication and a lot of empathy. I think to a certain extent, you really have to ask the right questions so that you can build the right things.
Yeah,
And that's really, I think, at the heart of why business analysis is so important. Because if you just are an order taker and they say, hey, I need a button to do something, well, do you really need a button? Like, what is the business value of a button? Tell me what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Tell me what it is, what kind of value you're trying to derive from the thing that you're telling me about. And then let's figure out how to communicate that to our solution architects and our development team, so that they can figure out, with the understanding of your Salesforce org, the best way to give you that value.
yeah, perfect. And I think we've all seen the nightmare Salesforce org with 20, 30 buttons because perhaps the team were, as you kind of aptly put it, order takers and literally just took the verbatim requirement. I want a button that does this, and then not really thought about that kind of emotion and thoughts and feelings and kind of motivations of the users as well. So I guess that's an important part of this too, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you really need a person who understands the org, like, on behalf of all the stakeholders, and will make the right decisions on the org based on what they already understand what's inside, on well architected best practices. um and even understanding like the future of Salesforce, where if you have all the business stakeholders basically just get to decide what's in there, like, I want a field, I want a button, you're going to end up with people duplicating things. Again, you get the 20 buttons, you end up with a lot of technical debt. And I mean, for the most part, your organs are kind of looking like Frankenstein. And I've seen it
Yeah.
happen again and again. You really do need like proper governance, proper center of excellence, particularly in more complex enterprise level orgs.
Yeah, perfect. And I guess you kind of hinted at it already in terms of stakeholder interviews and kind of journey mapping. What type of tools do you use to draw the outcomes from that? Would you go and create a journey map? Would the user stories come from that? How does that work?
To be honest, I don't do a whole lot of journey mapping. I do more business process
Yeah,
mapping. So like um with business process mapping, like there's a number of ways to skin that cat. So it's really a matter of how do I communicate what I want to communicate in this particular engagement. So sometimes there may be a more formal way of doing the business process mapping with okay, we've got the different shapes here and the different colors and the decision trees. Sometimes if folks are really new to business process mapping, I'll use universal process notation. I'm a big fan of that. It really kind of covers the who, what, when, how, why
yep,
of a business process. I tend to use lucid chart if I'm doing process mapping.
same.
um, it's just really easy to also do it live. So if
Yeah,
you're doing a Zoom meeting, I find it to be pretty easy to throw those visuals on the page. But I also like to like throw other notes on there. So okay, if there's a really manual process or a pain point, like let's make it a different color.
yep.
Again, it's the how do we. It's not just let's process, like write out the process and draw it out. It's how do we communicate? Because ultimately, it's a tool for communication.
hmm Okay, perfect. And you've kind of hinted at it already. But how does your role typically interact with other roles? So you're primarily kind of gathering the requirements and translating those into user stories. And at some point, you're going to hand those user stories over, right? How does that work?
So, mostly in the beginning, it's working with the business stakeholders. So, whether you're an internal BA or an external or BA, working with a consultancy, you're working with stakeholders that have a project in mind. So, getting those requirements, turning those into user stories, validating them. So, that's a big part of the job. Okay, so what I understood was this. Can you confirm that this is the correct thing that I wrote down and that these are the acceptance criteria? So if we met all of these acceptance criteria, this user story would be successful. And so that's a huge part where we all have to agree on what success looks like before we
Yeah,
can actually start building the thing. Like, are we building the right thing? We are. Okay, great. Move on. So once we get to there, it's usually moving that user story. And again, that user story is going to be really the foundation of that project because it's going to go all the way to the end. So after baby bird leaves the nest and user story goes off to the dev team, it's more of okay, how do we solution for it? And the BA is usually in the room for that, but they're not usually responsible for. They should be responsible. Let me just throw that out. But not,
yeah,
not that they are. They just shouldn't be responsible, but they should be in the room. They should be informed. They should have an opinion. Um, but that's where you usually give that user story to a solution architect or an admin, depending on how your team is kind of formed. Who is the person who's responsible for deciding how we're going to accomplish this in Salesforce? And then the user story moves to again either an admin or a dev team, depending on how it's been solutioned, to build it. And so they are trying to build it so that they meet all those acceptance criteria that
yeah.
ultimately equals success. And
Nice.
then we move on to, user acceptance testing and possibly training. So those user stories really can kind of go all the way until production. Um, because we're trying to communicate they communicate what we're trying to accomplish, over the course of a project.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you kind of touched on acceptance criteria there as well. Would you agree that if your acceptance criteria is well written, they can serve as your test scripts?
Yes, they're oftentimes the basis of the test scripts, and that's where it's like, I feel like a lot of times people think business analysts, like, go into a cave after the requirements are gathered, like, "Okay, we put them away until the next
Hibernation.
project.
Yeah.
They're done." But BAs, like I said, those user stories are supposed to carry you throughout the project. Like, they are the backbone. They're the to-do list. They are oftentimes the basis for those user acceptance test scripts. So,
Mhm.
okay, we need it to do this. Okay, well, what's the click path? so that we can get to that. All right, did it work? Yes, no. Okay, great. And move on.
Yeah, perfect. And a little bit of a controversial question, and I feel like you're definitely going to have an opinion on this one.
Oh no. Do I need to pull
Y-
up? I already know. I already know. Let me pull up
okay,
LinkedIn.
yeah. So, do you typically see people in this role, in the BA role, full time as their entire kind of responsibility, or do you sometimes work with perhaps a consultant or a solution architect that's performing that role? Like, what's the norm in the ecosystem?
I don't think it's that controversial. I'm actually okay with this.
Yeah,
So business analysis, it again, it depends on the complexity of your org and the size of your team, your team makeup. I think for me, consultant and business analyst, you can be both. For me, consultant is a title, but business analyst is a role. So I'm a consultant at my current organization. I'm an associate principal consultant, but on this project, I might play a business analyst. And so when they bill me out, I'm a business analyst. On this project, I might be a solution architect. So they bill me out as a solution architect, but my title is always going to be associate principal consultant. It's not business analyst on a day to day basis.
yeah,
So for more external projects, I think of it as like the role that you play on that particular project. And certain projects, when they're very complex, need somebody full time who's going to be playing that business analyst role. Now, there are certain orgs, internally, that need a full time business analyst. If they do have a particularly complex org, or they have a lot of users and they're continually improving it, they're really adopting agile methodology and continuous improvement.
yeah.
Likely you're going to need a full-time business analyst, but if you don't, that admin has to wear that hat. Whoever is responsible for anything that is project based on a Salesforce org needs to wear a BA hat. Business analysis is the foundation of any healthy Salesforce org, period.
I'm loving the passion that's coming out there. You definitely
I'll
feel,
fight.
yeah, a little bit strong about that, but it's great. So, kind of moving on to the next point, really. If there are people that are watching this and they're thinking, maybe this is something I want to do, maybe want to become a BA or go down this path. What kind of advice would you give those looking to start out? Like, where's the best place for them to get started?
So at this point, I would probably say Trailhead is the best place to start. There is a business analyst certification that came out last July. See, I thought you were going to bring up the controversial point of should admin be the prereq, because I was ready to fight for that. But
Yeah,
we are at this point where admin is not a prereq for it. So if folks that are interested in just going straight into a business analyst career can do the business analyst certification trail mix. I think there's a lot of good information on there. It's still a work in progress. So I do feel like also checking out other resources like Elements Academy or BA blocks like non-Salesforce business
mm,
analysis, foundational education is useful. Salesforce is just very focused on admins and developers and architects right now. And so I don't think the emphasis has been put on business analysis quite as much as it should. So while Trailhead is good, I do think people looking to start out should also seek sources outside of Trailhead in order to get a better, well rounded foundation for business analysis and work with other BAs. Do a clicked experience.
perfect. So you kind of hinted at it already, but a mixture of kind of hands-on real life experience plus certifications as well. And I guess if you can, you're probably in a stronger position if you do try to go for that admin cert first, right? And kind of go through
Absolutely.
the
Oh, you had
yeah,
to bring it up.
yeah, yeah, perfect. All
Listen,
right. So yeah,
I'll touch on it real quick. Like, I think it's really important. Like, I'm not going to ever suggest that anybody go for that business analyst cert first. Go for the admin cert. To understand Salesforce at a foundational level will make you a better business analyst if you are going to be a Salesforce business analyst. Otherwise, you just end up writing these user stories that are going to lead architects and admins to like, oh, I guess we need custom code for that. Like, you don't
yeah,
want to rebuild Salesforce. You have to understand what Salesforce does so that you can be a good BA. Because ultimately, you have to coach those stakeholders into what's possible. And if you don't know what's possible, you can't coach them.
yeah,
So
no, definitely, and it kind of leans into a little bit like user guidance and engagement as well. Like, for example, if you're writing a user story and you didn't know that a path was a thing in Salesforce, you wouldn't necessarily like hint at that or lean into that into your user story. So, and there are other things as well, like about help text and validation rules and all these other things that you wouldn't necessarily know if you didn't have that Salesforce exposure, right?
Absolutely.
We're all human, right? And we make mistakes all the time. If you were to start out again, so say this was you right now at the beginning of your journey, what would you choose to do differently, or what would you change?
Um, I probably would have gotten involved in the community sooner. I really And I was a decade into my Salesforce career before I really tapped into the Salesforce community. And where that held me back, particularly in something like business analysis, where there isn't a ton of information readily available on the Salesforce website, is by speaking to the community and kind of finding the people that were experts in the areas that I didn't even know I wanted to be an expert in, but by
Yeah.
getting involved, like the first time I saw Richard Cunningham speak or Ian Gott speak, like I almost like white knuckled my chair because I was so like, yes, I totally understand what you're talking about, but I didn't have the vocabulary to really express it before. And so getting that vocabulary down, which is why I love pushing clicked, because it's not even a matter of doing the thing. It's, can you build that vocabulary so that you can articulate the career that you want, so that you can find the resources that you need? If you don't have the vocabulary, it's very difficult. And it's still a learning journey. We're now that I'm more involved in the community actively, it's not even just about taking in the resources. It's about how can I help be on shows like this and help create the resources for future BAs so that maybe they don't have as hard of time as I did when I was starting out kind of 4 years ago.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think this type of format as well is equally here to encourage aspiring or kind of wannabe BAs really, and kind of empower those people using people like yours experiences to actually going ahead and kind of being signposted to the correct resources and tools to ultimately build their own path and journey, right? That's why we're here. So that's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you would like to kind of change people's perception of the BA track, or what people kind of perhaps stereotypically label a BA as, what's one thing that you would like to kind of change or maybe dispel a myth about?
Well, other than we don't go into a cave after the requirements have been gathered, um, I do think it's important that BAs are part of the dev team. And so I think that sometimes it's oh, BAs are very focused on business, and so they shouldn't have an opinion. But especially if you do have that admin cert, if you do have that foundational knowledge of Salesforce, um, it's important for a BA to say, let me see what you're doing. Let me understand the development work that's been done, and let me have an opinion on it. Sometimes, especially with the BA being so close to those end users, a lot of times they can look at development work that's in
Yep.
progress and go, this isn't going to work, guys, because of XYZ, because I've spoken to Jeff, and
Yeah.
Jeff has very strong opinions about this thing. And so it's having some more of that human element in there in your development.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's a great takeaway for almost every role across the ecosystem, is about working together. And as you kind of put it, being in the shoes of Jeff and kind of personifying that user, and ultimately thinking, oh, actually, is this great for them? Like, are there too many clicks here, or whatever it is, you know? Um, okay, perfect.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, I'll just throw a quick sidebar is like, being the BA, I often have to demo something at the end of a
mm,
sprint. And there are plenty of times where I look at the work that's been done and I go, does it meet all the acceptance criteria? Yes. Would anybody use this? Absolutely not. So that's where doing kind of the end to end, like,
yeah.
okay, does this business functionality work well? And letting the BA kind of contribute to that, I'm a big fan of.
And continuously learning, like those user stories aren't a rigid thing, right? They're a living breathing document almost.
Yep.
So yeah, naturally they will change over the course of the project, so that's good to remind viewers of that. So the last question really is, how can people connect with you and kind of be inspired by your content? So you mentioned the career roadshow, other things like that, Any other plugs that you'd like to put out, or any other kind of references that particularly helped you on your BA journey?
Well, absolutely feel free to check out the Salesforce Career Show pretty much anywhere that you listen to podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. I'm pretty active, RL Vanessa Grant. LinkedIn is Real Vanessa Grant. And pretty much, I think if you just Google Vanessa Grant and Salesforce at this point, if you see a romance Canadian author, that's not me. I don't write saucy content as my side hustle, but any other stuff that's Salesforce related would be me.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us today. And hopefully, this content, when it goes out live, it will help inspire those that are kind of pursuing their own paths to become empowered to be better BAs, or to start out their own career as BAs. So that's great. And thanks again for your time.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for tuning in to Be More with Tom Bassett. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave any feedback in the comments.